Is the big, beautiful bill good for the heart of America? Is it good for America's small and mid sized businesses? Well, let's take a look at that on today's episode of The Steve Beeman Show. Welcome back, my friends, to this issue of the Steve Beeman Show, this episode. We're going to talk today about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that's American small business. You know, the fact of the matter is they're about 90% or higher of American business is small business. It employs most of the people, does most of the patent work, does most of the copyrights. America's small business and the entrepreneurial mindset is the engine that built America. Well, I had a chance last night to have beers with a friend of mine who runs a small business where I live, and we talked about this big, beautiful bill and what it did, good, bad, and indifferent. And it talks to the heart, especially to some of the young people who vote for these, I'm going to say it, but these idiots on the left like Zohan in New York. We'll talk about this a lot today. This is a frightening person to me, and I want to talk to you about why it scares me. Because he's in line with Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the other politicians who go out and preach the envy economy to tell you that adding equality into this forced from the government is somehow going to make you better off. Well, it's not going to. Well, let's take a look at the big, beautiful bill and what it does do. The first and most notable thing it does is not raise taxes. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, that's a cut for the billionaires. They don't pay their fair share. Bull. I've shown you statistics that the top 10% of people pay virtually all the income taxes. The top 50% pay all of it. We already have an incredibly progressive tax code where the top wealthy expenditure people with income are paying all the taxes. Now, you can say, well, Warren Buffett lives off capital gains. Well, so can you. The fact of the matter is when you complain about all these people, you complain about Elon Musk and Tesla. If you complain so much, go buy Tesla stock. And when you sell it, you can live off capital gains. You don't have to be a billionaire to live off capital gains. You can do it as an entrepreneur, as an early, entrant into this. I gave a statistic out recently, and it said to the average young person, if you put $180 a month into the S&P 500 and just let it ride, by age 65, you're going to be a multimillionaire. Only in the United States can you do that. And I'm telling you, the Zohan in New York, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, and Bernie, and all these far left lunatics want to destroy that opportunity for you. But let me continue on the big, beautiful bill, because as much as I don't like that name, I just don't like political gamesmanship like that. It's just a spending bill. Yes, it's going to extend our borrowing, which none of us should like because we're borrowing ourselves into oblivion. But let's go back to that real quick. Where would you cut the budget? Virtually all of it is spent on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. Well, you can't cut interest. Which of those other three programs do you want to cut? Now you're going to say, well, cut defense. Okay, defense is the number 5 expenditure. And there's $1 trillion spent on defense. But if you do that, it's a dangerous world out there. And I'm telling you, we should be grateful to live in a country that is the most powerful in the history of the world to protect our liberty and our freedom from those who would want to do us harm. But let's go back to that. One of the things in this bill that I hear people complaining about constantly is, oh my God, they're cutting Medicaid. Okay, do you know what they did? I mean, let's be realistic here. The forecast for expenditure growth in Medicaid prior to this bill was 6% a year growth. Now, how many of you get a 6% wage increase every year? But that's what they expected to run up Medicaid. This bill cuts the growth in Medicaid back to 4% a year. That's what they're calling a cut. Welcome to government speak. They're not cutting anything. They're simply reducing the level of increase. Why do you think the deficit's going up still? Now, Trump's bet and the bet on the conservative movement, that's an economically centered area, is that this will stimulate growth in the economy, which will generate further increases in taxes and further ability to start, in the long run, reducing the deficits. We'll see if it does. But those two big points, that first of all, we're going to keep a tax cut in place, which, by the way, if you throw that out and you take taxes even on the rich way up like that, that'll be devastating to the economy. What do you think rich people do with their money? I mean, let's be realistic here. If you're Jeff Bezos, he just gotten a bunch of stink because of this extravagant wedding he threw in Venice. Now, that's not my cup of tea. I wouldn't do that. I don't believe in showing money like that. But hey, he does. So what? Who did he harm? Nobody. In fact, he's the best customer of a lot of those merchants in Venice. How would you like to be selling food into that group, or clothing, or entertainment, or shipping, or airplane transportation? The fact is, these rich people are great customers. Who of us wouldn't want one of them to be our customers? Because there's only a couple of things they can do with money. They either spend it, which helps build the private economy, and that's a good thing, or they save it. And that builds the economy, because what does that mean by save it? It means they're providing capital for the other side of the business community to grow. If you've ever tried to start a small business, where did you get the money? You either did it from your own savings, or you borrowed it, or you got capital, equity in your company. Borrowed it or equity means you went to some institution that had more money than you. That's the rich people who put up that money. It's not a bad thing. They don't hurt the economy. Because he spent $100 million on this wedding doesn't hurt you. It helps the people in the community. In the early 90s, when Bill Clinton raised taxes on yachts, because it was unfair that rich people have all these yachts, we're just going to charge them their fair share. What happened a couple of years after they did that? The yachting industry collapsed because people quit buying yachts. It didn't help anybody. It hurt the workers for the yacht companies. So when Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or Elon Musk goes out and buys a private jet, that just builds revenue for the company that makes the private jets. The maintenance people on the tarmac, the service people to the fixed-based operators they use. So this idea that we're cutting taxes for the billionaires and that's a bad thing? No, it's not. They get to allocate their money into the free markets. That's a good thing. It creates jobs. And for those of you who don't understand it, the best thing you can have in life is a productive job. But the government and the hypocrites are going to tell you, well, that just shows we should tax that money. Okay, what does the government do when they take that money? So let's assume you got $1 billion for the billionaire, $1 billion in taxes from that. This gets spent or invested into the private economy. That's a good thing. The government takes it, they strip off 30% to run the bureaucracy of government, and then they donate the rest to non-productive things. You can't have an economy based on government extracting the productive wealth of people who earn it. And if you haven't studied history, go study Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Russia. The Soviet system failed because socialism, communism by another name, doesn't work. It destroys incentive, it destroys the willingness of people to work, and it ultimately leads to slave labor. And I'll tell you why. Because, and they're going to see this in New York if this Zohan guy gets in, when you penalize the producers, they'll leave. What happens? Tax revenues go down to nothing. People don't want to work. They'll go on the social welfare systems because it's more productive for them to be on a social welfare system than it is to work in the private sector. Well, guess what happens? The government will come in and force you to work. That's exactly what they did in the Soviet Union. When people said, wait a minute, there's nothing in this for me, I'm not going to work, the government came in and put a gun to their head and said, oh, yes, you will. So what was a utopian system on paper and sells a lot of people on fairness and equity becomes a nightmare in reality, because what you get is government-enforced labor. So this bill for the small business and the mid-sized business keeping the taxes where they are not only gives the owner more capital to work with, hire more people, build expansion capacity, or just spend money. Either way, that's all good. And for the wealthy people, they'll just spend more and become better customers. So let's quit trying to penalize our way to the top and quit demonizing people with success. We should celebrate those people and try to be like them. They don't hurt anybody. They're not hurting you. Because in our economy, a person has $1 billion doesn't mean you don't. The markets that we have, the stock market especially, is not zero sum because one person makes money, another person doesn't have to lose money. Two people can make money. It's a growing game. So the bigger the fish pot, the bigger the pot, the more there is for everybody. It's the old adage, the rising tide lifts all boats. We want a rising tide, and taking taxes out of the economy doesn't make that happen. So in this bill, the number one thing is they sustain the tax cuts. Now, that's a good thing. There's also further regulatory relief for small business. And when I talk about small business, let's talk about what's the number? And I have the statistic here. 18 million businesses have just 1 to 4 employees. That's like 70% of all business. So what does this do for them? Well, by deregulating this stuff and by keeping taxes low, it allows them to hire more people. But you're over-regulating these people to no end. I had a meeting with a guy who runs a landscaping thing. He spent $20,000 last year on license plates for his trucks. The roads aren't any better. Government didn't use that money productively. It squandered it. If he'd have kept it, that $20,000 would have been used to buy more trucks, to buy more equipment, to hire more people. So for the small and mid-sized business, this tax bill, keeping the tax cuts and tax rates where they are, is beneficial. The deregulatory nature of the bill is helpful. We need to keep things deregulated for small so they can compete. They don't have lobbyists. They don't have the kind of infrastructure that IBM and GE have. The small guy, the independent business, needs stuff like the National Federation of Independent Business, lobbying groups for them. Because these people are the heartbeat of America, and we're strangling them with overtaxation at the state, local, and federal levels. We're over-regulating them to the point they can't run their businesses. This whole issue of liability reform ought to go to the small business. The insurance rates these businesses carry for liability is staggering. But they're afraid that something goes wrong on their company, they're going to get sued, and they'll be dead. These independent people, again, Elizabeth Warren, you didn't build it. The hell they didn't. It's their capital at risk. It's their financial life at risk. Because if that business fails, they go down with it. The employees don't. They just walk away and get another job. I'm so fed up with that. I have been on the winning side of businesses, and yeah, I built them. I put my time, my risk, my soul into those things. And yes, at some point when we grew to a certain point, we could hire other people to do the work that we could expand the company with. But who wrote their paychecks? I did. I took the risk. Now, when it wins, everybody wins, and it's a happy day. But I have been on those sides that lose. And when a business fails, who eats it? It's the owner, the guy who started that business. And where are the Elizabeth Warrens then? Well, okay, you didn't really build this, but well, maybe you did because you're liable for it. Small business does all of this because they believe in their own economy. They believe in their own enfranchisement. They want to live out their individual dream. And it could be a guy who cuts grass. It could be a guy who washes windows, a guy who does your sewer or septic or plumbing, all the way up to the guys that have tech companies, the guys with law firms and accountants. These are small businesses generally. And this bill, because it keeps taxes low and because it keeps regulations somewhat down, it's going to help. Now, you could argue and say, well, what about the medical care thing? What about healthcare costs? Yeah, you're right. Healthcare costs is killing small business. The Affordable Care Act that most of you on the left wanted, I'm a small business. I'm an independent business. And I will tell you that my healthcare went up 400% because of the Affordable Care Act. because we're independent people. We're independently insured. We're not part of a big group. We're not part of a master group in the insurance thing that can spread risk. We're small guys. We have 5, 10 employees. But you want to make these insurance regulations hit all these small guys, and that's just outrageous. We're going to stop the American dream. You're going to make it so painful for people to start their own business that they won't be able to do it. And the future of America, because of the whole nature of the decentralized digital economy, has to grow through the independent business person, the micro businesses. And again, the businesses less than $1 million in revenues in this country are the ones who run it. They're the heartbeat of our country, and you can't forget that. They did build it. They're the ones taking the risk. So they need Washington to get off their backs and keep their taxes low and get out of their healthcare costs. Well, what this does is it tries to cut back on Medicaid, which is strangling the states, which is causing them to raise taxes on the small business. So it tries to rein that in. It definitely keeps tax rates lower, and it's trying to cut the regulatory environment. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, what about the tariffs? Isn't that going to hurt the small business? And I will tell you, that's a gamble that was taken. We have had since 1980, and I was a Ronald Reagan supporter, but I think he made a mistake when he moved into the zone of free trade. What he did is he dropped trade barriers into the U.S., certainly, but we allowed other countries to keep their barriers up. So what happened is we saw the middle class decimated in this country. Manufacturing, in large part, went overseas, went down to Mexico, because it was more expensive to run the company in the United States than it was to pay a tariff, because you don't pay an import tariff to the United States. Well, Trump's trying to balance that. He's trying to say we can no longer have one-way trade. We have to have some semblance of a level playing field. I think it's a gamble, but I think in the end it's going to work. He will get trade deals out of this that make it better for American small business and American mid-sized business to execute sales of their products overseas. With the incredible power of the Amazons now, of eBay, of all the digital services, a manufacturer in the middle of Iowa can sell their services or their product globally. We need to make it attractive to be here in the U.S., and we need to have those countries drop their trade barriers so we can sell into those countries. I mean, the most egregious ones, you've heard selling bananas into, I think it's Israel, it's like a 65% tariff. There are all kinds of examples of the cost of the tariffs. But we're stopping America's small business from selling into those countries. So we have to renegotiate these trade deals. We have to. And what Trump did is throw out a bludgeoning instrument. Now, you could argue and say that's a stupid negotiating tactic. We'll wait and see. You had an economist from Yahoo Finance recently that came out and said Trump outsmarted all of us because they're working. Well, I don't know. I think the jury's out. I hope they work. I hope for my small business brethren that they work. Small business is the backbone of all that's good in this country. I wrote The American Dream Under Fire. You can get it on Amazon, but it's a whole book about the American dream and how it has been all that's good in this country. Small business is what makes this country work. Entrepreneurialism, the ability to say, I want more for myself. That's not an unhealthy attitude. It benefits everybody. Because if you're successful, your wealth generated through that company gets spent in the economy. That's good. Or if you have enough of it, it gets invested. And that's good. How many businesses have come to me over time and said, hey, could I get a loan? Could I get capital for this company? Now, I used to be able to do some of that. I just had a company I own blow up, so it's kind of got me in a pickle. But I've given out tons of money to people, not in generosity, but in good business. That's what the people do in small business when they have excess cash flow. That's their capital gains. So by complaining about it and saying, well, that's a rich guy, because he has it and I don't, I'm jealous of it, so I want his money. Doesn't help you. You can take the wealthy people, split up their money, and give out their pro rata share to everybody in the country. And it's a couple grand. It does nothing. What we need to do is build an economy with it. And the way to build and continue to build the most powerful economy ever known is through freedom. And that's what this big, beautiful bill does. I'm not saying it's all perfect. It's not. Elon Musk left because I think he got mad at the deficit, and I don't blame him. But this is a negotiated settlement between disparate parties. And at the core, it says, let's keep taxes where they are. Let's not raise taxes. It's not a tax cut. It's just not an increase in taxes. Again, only in government is that a cut. We're not going to raise taxes. And a lot of those taxes, by the way, are on the middle class. They're not rich people taxes. I mean, you look at where these tax cuts are coming from. They're not just keeping the income tax steady and everybody benefits. Most rich people in capital gains and all the money they have, they're not paying the kind of taxes anyway. You know it and I know it. They have good accountants to get them out of it. But the point is that doesn't hurt you. If the rich guy says, I made $1 billion last year, good for him. Please put some of it in a venture capital fund that I can get to start my business. Don't give it to the government where they'll just squander it. And if you don't think they do, go look at Solyndra or the list of companies they've tried to, run over their time. They always fail. Don't give it to the big, because when government gives it out, they give it to General Motors in a bailout. They give it to, do any of you remember the 2008 debacle? How much money did the federal government give of your money to the big financial companies in the country? You don't want the government to have your money. Leave it in the hands of private business, private individuals, especially in the small business arena. And that's most of them. The millionaire next door is the small business. Again, they own the plumbing shop, the electric shop, the car repair company. It's not flashy. It's not glamorous. It's not, hugely well known. But these are the people who've worked hard from the bottom up. They've dusted it off pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. And we go out and we lump them in and say, well, let's tax their business. Business makes all this money. You got to wake up. First of all, when you raise these people's taxes, you're not getting a benefit. You're just transferring a tax. You're still paying it. Businesses just raise their prices. So if you say, well, this big bad business, I want to go in and I want to raise their taxes 5%. So the business has sold you $1, product for $1, now has costs that have gone up 5%. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to raise your prices. Business taxes are just hidden taxes on you. It's more government speak. It's Ray Bradbury's 1984 newspeak. But until people wake up to that, government will continue to say, let's tax the big bad business. Well, the 70% of them are the micro and small businesses, and that's who they're taxing. And that's why it's making the American dream more and more difficult. We have to have a rational, real understanding of taxes. You, individuals, pay taxes. Businesses don't. They just pass it on. The more you tax them, the higher your prices go. But then if the individuals say, well, he's rich, he shouldn't have all that. This idiot in New York said there should never be a billionaire. Why not? What's a billionaire ever done to hurt anybody? J. Paul Getty, he was worth billions of dollars. Who did he ever hurt? The Henry Ford family, who do they hurt with their billions? They produce a lot of cars and they employ a lot of people. They create a lot of wealth for suppliers down the stream. But no, because they have more than we do, we're going to be jealous and we want to take their money and give it to government to squander it. That's not rational. But again, our educational systems have brainwashed our young people into believing that Marxism works, and it doesn't. And if you say, well, it's not Marxism, it's democratic socialism, that's a bunch of BS if ever there's been any. When you start talking about nationalizing companies, having grocery stores owned by the state, when you talk about nobody having more than $1 billion, we're going to cap the total you can make. That dives into communism pretty quick. Go look at Venezuela. I think it took them 12 months to collapse, maybe 18. Venezuela was a very wealthy country, very strong middle class, all of it. The government was corrupt, but that's common in certain countries. But they overthrew it with one of these, well, let's have equality and let's have free medical stuff and free education. And people bought it. So they put in a communist regime, and within 18 months, they had bread lines. Well, then the government had to start keeping social unrest down, so they start jailing you if you disagree with them. Why do you think China has a social score? Communism doesn't work. Anyway, my concern for it is that you're going to screw up the small business entrepreneurs in this country. And for that reason and that reason alone, I fully support this bill. I hope they do more going down the line to reduce taxation, to reduce regulation, and to give people a chance to be free and to build their own economy. And I want you to do that. I want you to take advantage of this decentralized digital economy, the idea economy, and take your ideas and make them work. Become part of that class of people who own their own company. There are millions of Americans who do. 35 million, I think, is the last count. You can do it, but you're not going to do it if you buy into the BS taught to you by Bernie and AOC and your schools, the educational institutions who do anything but educate, who indoctrinate, and have taught you that collectivism is good, that equality and fairness are the goals of government. No, it's not. The purpose of the government is to protect us from it. When you look at our Constitution and the miracle of the American experiment, it is all because we had the right to life, liberty, and it originally said property, but we changed it to the pursuit of happiness. Government didn't give us our rights because they can take them away if they do. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights simply says that government can never impose on us. Well, for some reason, we're letting it in every way you can. I was in a talk recently about property taxes. And I know some of you think property taxes are the greatest thing in the world. But I'll tell you, when did we ever give up in this country the right to own our own home? And if you don't think property taxes destroyed that right, think again. You don't pay property taxes, the rent you pay the government, they're going to take your home. Somehow, one of the greatest gifts to America is private property. We could own real estate. That's one of the reasons the royals in Europe hated us. They didn't want the average person to own real estate. The land in Europe is owned by the landed gentry, right? They don't ever sell their land. They've been holding it for hundreds of years, and they still do. If you buy a house in places like England, you rent it for 100 years, so you can live on it for your whole life, but you never own it because the landlord will never sell their property. They'll never sell their land. But in our country, you and I gave it up. In the interest of some semblance, again, of fairness, we went to the counties in this country and we said, you can tax our real estate holdings. What did that do? It means you can never own your home. Best case, you rent the land. So you gave your land back to the government. I don't understand why we did that. I guess I'm old-fashioned. I believe in liberty. I believe in the right to your own home and your own destiny and your own dream. Again, I've talked about a lot, but in this, this bill, there's a lot of regulatory relief in it for firms under 10 people. That's good. I think it could go a lot farther. I'd like to see zero regulation on the mom and pop shops, but I'd like to see no taxation on them either. I think if you have a company under 50 people, you should pay no tax at all. We need entrepreneurs in this country. We need small business. We need people to execute their dream. Because when the late 80s, I took Soviet people through the country. I've talked about this before, but they were with Belarus Machinery. And they couldn't understand why our grocery stores had so much choice at such low price. And it's because we have so many people making so many products and competing on so many levels. The American system of distribution and food production and clothing production, all that is so far above anybody else in the world, or at least was. We've got to keep that. So again, Trump's effort in this bill, I mean, obviously they're talking about tax simplification, maybe having a single page for businesses under $5 million instead of these big, thick accountant-laden costs. Big business can afford accountants, small business can't. So let's simplify it. This bill does that. I like that. The digital infrastructure that this bill puts in place. Trump's a big fan of AI, and I love seeing it. I love seeing more access to broadband offered, to fiber optic cables, to fast internet. Again, what we're doing right here on this podcast wasn't possible many years ago. It's the advancements in technology, internet delivery, and effectiveness and accessibility. So that's all good. There is a incentive they're thinking about putting in it. I think it'll pass the House, but it will give a payroll tax relief on hiring for the next 5 years. Well, that's cool because, again, let's talk about that. In a payroll tax, which you pay Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, you pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. It's like 7.6% from you, the employee, but your employer pays another 7.6%. It's like a 15% employment tax. Well, that raises the cost of employees. Again, you could argue that GE or Microsoft can afford to pay it. Your local plumbing contractor, electrical contractor, gasoline gas store, they can't. The restaurants that employ an awful lot of people can't pay those increased taxes. So this bill tries to lower the tax by reducing the payroll tax. That's a good thing. I mean, there is more in the world of access to capital. This bill supports peer-to-peer lending. It supports more access to capital. It talks about tokenization, which I've talked to you a lot about. I think we're going to a tokenized economy. I think, as I've said 1,000 times, tomorrow doesn't look like yesterday because our economy is changing rapidly. I want you to participate in that tokenized economy. I want you to be part of what is effectively Galt's Gulch, the ability to operate off the grid in a free economy of your own ideas and thoughts and imagination. This bill is not perfect, but it goes to it. You know, I could sit here and tell you stories all day about my experience from the time I was 18, 19 years old up until now. I'm talking 40 years of small business entrepreneurship. I've had winners and I've had big losers. I mean, it's not an easy game. But I need government to have less control, less taxation, because I want to keep playing the game. And those of you in small business who hear this know what I'm talking about. It's expensive to hire accountants to do your taxes. It's expensive to pay insurance to cover all the liabilities that you have imposed on you. It's not productive. We need this stuff to change. So whether you're a voter, a member of an organization like the NFIB, which is a great organization, or the chambers, or you're an entrepreneur, I think this bill is for you. Is it perfect? No. No political sausage ever is made that's perfect. But it's a far cry better than what could have been. A major tax increase on the economy right now would be devastating. Further regulation on small business, devastating. We need to have a government that gets out of the hands of the American small business. Those are the people who make this all work. Steve Jobs started in his garage. He wasn't a big business when Apple started. He was a guy with a vision. Bill Gates started in an office with one guy. They're not. Sam Walton, the Walton family. Sam started with one store in Bentonville, Arkansas. He was a small business. Now, he had a better idea, and he was able to grow it and scale it because he's smart and hardworking. I mean, Ray Kroc with McDonald Brothers, they had, 5 stores out in California? He turned it into the fast food behemoth it is. But most of those are franchises. They're owned by small business people. They're not owned by the McDonald's Corporation. It's the small business person that owns those franchises. And they're the ones who suffer when government throws in minimum wage rules like they do, work rules like they do, taxes like they do, regulations like they do. They are the ones who are going to be behind this bill. They're going to look and say, my business needs to thrive. Because if our small business community doesn't thrive, innovation dies, opportunity dies, hope dies with it. We need to support these people. I mean, I've spent many years preaching for the benefit of small business. I've given live speeches about it. I've created companies that support small businesses. I believe in this country, and I believe that what's good in this country starts with small business. I mean, think of John D. Rockefeller. He started as a small business guy. He saw something and said, there's a better idea. Turned it into Standard Oil. Again, Henry Ford. He wasn't some rich guy who just, he borrowed money from rich people to start Ford Motor Company. That's how this game's played, and it's been played for 200 years of freedom. Don't cut it off. Don't buy into the envy economy. Don't buy into the fact that the billionaires are bad. And no, I'm not sucking up to the billionaires. I get tired of hearing that. I'm telling you the truth. Because somebody has something doesn't mean you can't have it. If you have the ingenuity and the hard work and the better idea, you too can become one of them. Again, there are countless examples. Milton Hershey. He was bankrupt 2 or 3 times before he finally hit it with Hershey's chocolate. These examples are everywhere. And these are the kind of people who support this bill because they know taxes are counterproductive. And you talk, well, back in the 70s, we had a 70% tax rate. Yeah, but we also had so many deductions, nobody paid that tax rate. You could deduct interest on your cars, all of your cars, business or otherwise. You could deduct every meal that you ever had. Nobody paid that kind of a tax rate. That was what created deferred compensation plans because people didn't want to pay those taxes. The way to measure it is to look at the government as a percent of our GDP. The federal government has sustained at about 20 to 23% of our GDP for a long time. Now, they're up on the upper end of that now because they've grown over the last 15 years, but they're about 23% of our GDP. You throw in state and local government to that, it jumps up to about 40%. That's the highest it's ever been. So of our GDP, with what, 25 trillion? 10 trillion of it's state, local, and federal government. That's not productive money. That's not being used to forward a bigger economy. You could argue it's necessary, but it's a drain. It's not a productive expense. The more of it you have, the less productive expense you'll have. And I want an economy that works for my kids and my grandkids. And we're not going to get it if we keep putting people in power like this Zohan guy in New York. It won't work. He will destroy New York because guess what? The rich people will just leave. And he'll be left with a far smaller tax base. It's going on in Illinois, where I live. People who can afford to leave this state are leaving in droves because the government of Illinois keeps wanting to just raise more and more taxes and more regulations. The more people who leave, the higher the tax goes on the remaining people, which makes more of them want to go. And it's a death spiral. We, the people, have to get our arms around this, and we have to start supporting common sense legislation. And that legislation, I empathize with Rand Paul, who wants to really cut government. I get that because the interest rates and the cost to us of these interest rates is ridiculous. But I remember the 70s when interest rates were much, much higher. So to me, it's not that bad, but I guess that's relative. I hope and I pray as you think about what you support in your political efforts, you look at the truth of what these people are trying to sell you. They're not for small business. They can say it and they talk about it out both sides of their mouth. They're not for small business. The whole DEI initiative, you can love it or hate it for the military and the big guys. I don't care. But for the small guys, they can't afford that stuff. They have to hire only on merit. They need the few people they can hire. They have to hire the most productive ones. It's a lot to think about, but I hope that you will support the small business community and think for them, because they pay most of the taxes in this country. They come up with most of the inventions in this country. They employ most of the people in this country, and they are taxed higher than anybody. So for them, absolutely, I hope the bill passes, and I hope it passes the House. By the time you see this, it will have, and I'll be glad for it because it's a start. We still need to get that new capital into this economy. We need to get more deregulation done, but it's a start to say, let's start giving benefit to the middle class. And by the way, for those of you who watch, we did get a report in the last couple of weeks that the biggest income growth in our country from January to June was in the lower middle, the blue collar workers. They're the ones making more money, not the upper tier, not the upper middle. It's the lower middle. So something must be working for them. And you know what it is? It's because we're bringing manufacturing jobs back. We're bringing skilled labor back. And we do that through better trade deals. We do it through better regulation and lower taxes. Anyway, I hope, as always, that you'll stay with me. We're going to try to go live up on YouTube and here on TikTok and all the other venues. I want to spend more time with you, and I'd like to get to know you better. So I urge you to write me at steve@stevebeeman.com if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them because I do get them frequently, which is what generates a lot of this. Again, today's little passionate thing of mine was driven because I had drinks last night with a guy who is a small businessman. And listening to his horror stories just makes my stomach turn. I think it's important. But this is the age of agency. The decentralized economy that I talked to you all about will give you more ability to be free than ever before. I hope you'll take advantage of it. And I hope you'll rethink where you stand on supporting people who don't want to help you. They're out to help themselves. Go back to my thing on millionaires, billionaires, and hypocrites. The political class is not out to help you. They don't exist for that. They exist to get reelected. They'll tell you anything. They have no grounding in truth. Anyway, we could go on that all day too. But I thank you, as always, for watching me. And I can only hope that you stay sovereign, stay safe, and stay free. Again, I'm Steve Beeman, and thanks for watching.